All right, good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. I call this meeting to order. Our board clerk, Jessica Haba, will take roll call this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Bajana Eaton and Andy Coe are absent this evening. For the record, I will verbally confirm the following board members as present. Sal Camerata, Chris Johnson, Mike Roselli, Jeff Moncrief, Sean McAndrew, Diane Mayo, Ken George, and Reuben Moore is not with us.
Yep, terrific. Well, thank you. The Cary Community Plan will continue to be the guiding document for this board. Our role is to function as citizen advisors to the council who will ultimately make the final decision on all rezoning activity. We recognize that not all rezoning requests are supported unanimously by members of our community, but we strive to balance the impact of increased building density required to support Cary's growth while maintaining the historic charm and character of Cary. The Cary Community Plan was initially adopted in 2017 following a collaborative effort between Cary's citizens and our town government. That collaboration has continued and resulted in a recently updated version of the plan adopted by Council in January of 2025. The chapters of the plan include live, work, shape, engage, move, enrich, serve, and act. The community plan can be found on Cary's website. Your citizen opinions based on the community plan document play a very important role in advising our leaders. We encourage our citizens to refer to the plan and provide feedback that is based on guiding principles of the plan as it relates to the rezoning request. Many of you have written to this board asking us to reject the Waverly rezoning request, but we are incapable of providing that recommendation. I want to reiterate to the residents following this specific rezoning request that the role of the Planning and Zoning Board is not to provide approval or disapproval of the proposed rezoning, but rather to evaluate whether the proposed rezoning is consistent with the imagined Cary plan. The final decision will ultimately be up to our town council. Regardless of how we vote this evening, it will not be without thoughtful consideration of the issues raised by surrounding residents who have been vocal in their opposition to this proposed rezoning. While this is a public meeting, it is not a public hearing. There's no opportunity for the public to speak during this meeting. If you have comments about any of these items, we encourage you to reach out to staff by email or phone. You may reach out to our board members through email. You may also contact council directly through email or during the public speaks out portion of any regularly scheduled council meeting. These meetings may be streamed live on Cary's website and will be posted to YouTube. All the past Planning and Zoning Board meetings are available to view on YouTube. Will someone make a motion to adopt the agenda tonight?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and so we also need to get an approval of the meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 20th meeting, or this says February 20th, but for tonight's meeting?
Move to adopt. Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, well, that brings us to our first case tonight. This is 23 REZ 12 Waverly Place rezoning. On the agenda, we have Katie Dry will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff and the applicant. Ms. Dry, would you please proceed?
Yes. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Board. This is a request for rezoning of the Waverly Place Shopping Center. This proposal aims to redevelop a portion of the Waverly Place Shopping Center through the integration of multifamily residences, additional commercial uses, and structured parking. Much of the existing shopping center will remain in place. The current boundary includes 2 existing parking lots behind the Whole Foods and in front of Senna Bistro. A portion of the building that includes the Senna Bistro area is also included within the project boundary. Area that is not included in the rezoning is the Whole Foods, Shake Shack, as well as other tenants. Some of the outparcels, as well as the medical office buildings, are not included because they are owned by another entity. In total, this area includes about 7.75 acres, and it is a portion of the larger 22.45 acre shopping center. The current zoning is general commercial conditional use. and the applicant is proposing to rezone to the mixed-use district, or MXD. According to the future roadway widths map, the site is located on local private roads within a shopping center. Nearby thoroughfares include Tryon Road and Kildare Farm Road, both of which are built to their ultimate cross-section. The site is served by nearby Go Cary fixed routes as well as Go Triangle transit routes. The Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources Master Plan does not include any proposed greenway corridors within or adjacent to the site, but there are Cary greenways that are nearby, including the Swift Creek Greenway and the Crescent Green Greenway, which are about a half a mile from the site. Cary is also in the process of updating our PRCR system plan, and you received an invitation to attend the open house, which is tomorrow, March 25th. This draft plan will look at adding both greenways and street side trails in close proximity to the site. There are 2 parks close by, first including the Marla Durrell Park, which is about 0.7 miles to the east of the site, and the Harold Ritter Park, which is about 0.8 miles to the southwest. According to Cary's GIS maps, a portion of the site is impacted by stream buffers. Field determination would occur at the time of development plan review. The PDP includes 2 development pods, and these development pods are bisected by a roadway called Circulation A. Buildings permitted within these pods could be between 4 to 7 floors, and the development will include 2 buildings, so they will not span across Circulation A. There'll be 2 separate buildings at least. The proposed uses include 300 to 750 multifamily units, as well as 5 to 30,000 square feet of commercial uses, which include office, brewery, retail, ABC store, just to name a few. Since the public hearing, the applicants added 2 additional uses, amusement establishment and commercial recreation center. And we note that these uses are only allowed if they occupy the existing building within Pod 1, and that's the Cine Bistro site. And also if the use is no more than 30,000 square feet. So in the event that the Cine Bistro building is leased for one of these uses, that would occur prior to redevelopment happening. Just to note, the current zoning on the site is general commercial. So this is just a snapshot of many of the uses that would be currently allowed by right today. So for example, some of the uses allowed by right today could include a convenience store, vehicle filling station, crematorium, kennel, and with the new conditions that the applicants are proposing, they would be reducing the number of allowable uses to those shown here in white, which would include uses such as nightclub and bar, retail, neighborhood recreation, personal service establishment, brewery, theater, ABC store. In general, the narrowing of the uses eliminates many of the uses that would not be appropriate for a destination center. Therefore, the proposed rezoning from general commercial to mixed-use district does propose uses that are closer in alignment with destination center policies. The dimensional standards proposed with this case include a building height of 4 to 7 floors with a maximum building height of no higher than 85 feet. They are proposing build-to lines to ensure urban frontages so that buildings are pulled up to the streets, meaning that buildings can be set back no further than 25 feet. And they're also proposing 15-foot wide streetscapes along Colonnades, New Waverly, and Circulation A. Within each of these streetscapes, there will be sidewalk. There will be 10-foot sidewalk along Colonnades and New Waverly Place, and 6 to 10-foot wide sidewalk along Circulation A. There will be 15,000 square feet of community gathering area. This is roughly 3 times the required amount from the LDO of 5,000 square feet. Each community gathering area will include at least 3 amenities from a pick list, and this would include items such as seating, decorative planting beds, amenities for residents that also include like patios, things like that. They've also committed to activated rooftops with a minimum square footage of 400 square feet for an activated rooftop. We also note that the existing community gathering area within Waverly Place, that's shown here in red, is not included in this rezoning. So this would be in addition to that existing community gathering space. But also, just to note with that, because that area is outside of this rezoning request, and it's zoned general commercial, it could remain or it could go away at a future date. Parking within this development would be provided within structured parking decks, with the exception of parallel parking. The PDP would also allow for some temporary on-street parallel parking associated with construction along New Waverly Place. To ensure that structured parking is appropriately screened, the applicants have proposed a diagram indicating primary and secondary parking deck screening. So primary parking deck screening would be at a higher standard, and the applicants have committed that the parking decks would be screened with buildings, or they would be designed to mimic a building and having the architectural style of a building. And that would be for parking decks fronting Colonnades Way, New Waverly Place, and along Circulation A. For secondary parking deck screening, they have proposed green screens or landscape walls or metal screen panels that would be similar to the examples shown here. Continuing on with parking, there are 10 electric vehicle charging stations that would be included. Each charging station would have 2 ports for the ability to total charging 20 cars at once. They've also committed that a minimum of 10% of the parking spaces will be EV ready, inclusive of the 20 EV charging spaces. And to exceed Cary's bike rack requirement for the full shopping center by 20%. The traffic study, which is 23 TAR 476, recommended improvements at 4 study intersections. 2 of the 4 are side access points, and these are identified in the circles here. The applicant has offered to provide improvements at their site access on New Waverly Place, shown in green. And in addition to improvements at the traffic study, or that the traffic study recommended, it also recommended the inclusion of pedestrian and bicycle-friendly facilities to enable the safe and comfortable travel for bicyclists and pedestrians within the site. Additionally, the applicant has offered 2 turn lane improvements on Tryon Road. The circulation plan proposes the addition of 10-foot wide sidewalks along the site frontage for both pods 1 and 2, and limited sidewalk improvements elsewhere on the site, but also outside of the area being rezoned. The PDP also calls for the use of buffered bicycle lanes and shared bicycle lanes within the shopping center. They have conditioned these improvements, so they will require approval from the Property Owners Association before they can be installed. So a third-party approval would be needed for the bicycle improvements to be installed on the site. The existing Waverly development was built prior to Cary's current stormwater regulations, and concerns have been shared by nearby residents over impacts to streams and lakes downstream. And in response, the applicant has proposed a zoning condition to reduce stormwater impacts downstream through a commitment to use green stormwater infrastructure and low-impact development. Specifically, the condition will reduce the post-development runoff for the 25-year storm to an equivalent of a 10% reduction in impervious area. The PDP proposes to set aside 10 workforce housing units for those earning 80% of the area median income for a period of 20 years, and also limiting 10% of the units to no more than 750 square feet, and this refers to heated floor area. Architectural conditions include committing that pods 1 and 2 will be at least 2 separate buildings. That will help with massing considerations for the site. Increasing the masonry requirements from 35% to 40%. Prohibiting certain building materials such as vinyl siding and concrete masonry units. Committing to a variation in roof form and height. Requirement for modulations of building facades. Requirement that 50% of the units have balconies, and provision for street-level canopies. So since this case is a mixed-use district, they do have the ability to ask for modifications from Cary's land development ordinance. and the applicants have asked for a total of 5, and I'll walk through those here. So first, they're requesting a modification to allow for vehicular gates for residential parking spaces. They're also requesting the on-street parking to count for the minimum parking requirements. Under streetscapes, they're asking for 2. First, to be able to grade and replant within streetscapes. They're also proposing a custom planting rate, detailed in the PDP. And lastly, they're proposing the removal of 2 champion trees, but they are proposing to plant replacement trees in accordance with the land development ordinance provisions. A public hearing was held in June of 2024, and there were significant participation and comments at the public hearing, with citizens sharing concerns regarding traffic, building height, stormwater, affordable housing, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, specifically to the nearby hospital. And following the public hearing, there have been continuous and numerous emails and calls from citizens regarding the case. So following the public hearing, the applicants have made the following changes. They've updated the stormwater condition. They have also noted that the buffered and shared bicycle lanes would be installed with the approval of the Property Owners Association at the shopping center. They've added certain architectural conditions, the new uses that I shared with you, the amusement establishment and commercial recreation center, added a maximum building height of 85 feet, and they've committed that pods 1 and 2 will be separated into 2 separate buildings. So before the public hearing, those pods could have been merged into one large building spanning that circulation A. They've also proposed improvements for 2 turn lanes on Tryon Road, one at Kildare Farm Road and one at New Waverly Place. And the team also proposed a supplemental traffic analysis, which was dated February 10th of 2025 and attached to your staff report. And in the traffic analysis, they analyzed the site, removing the internal capture. And with that, the findings found that 2 intersections experienced delays beyond the original reported traffic study, and those included the intersections of Tryon Road and Summerwinds Drive, and Crescent Green and Kildare Farm Road. And I'll also note that while the recommended and applicant offered improvements may help to reduce delays at certain intersections, Kildare Farm Road and Tryon Road serve as key thoroughfares and connectors in the area's transportation network, both to the south and to the east of the area. And so as such, traffic delays, particularly during peak hours, are expected to persist despite these improvements and regardless of the outcomes of this particular rezoning request. Additionally, while the average daily traffic volumes on Tryon Road and Kildare Farm Road remain slightly below pre-pandemic levels from 2019, they are trending upward, and future regional growth and traffic patterns will continue to influence congestion along these corridors, reinforcing the need for ongoing monitoring and potential long-term transportation solutions. The applicant team also conducted a balloon test. The two balloon tests were conducted. Both of these were submitted with reports and attached to your staff report tonight. And the test included flying a balloon to illustrate the height of the proposed buildings. The applicant indicated that due to issues with wind on the first day in February, they ultimately had a second test on March 5th. So staff has conducted our analysis, with the Cary community plan. We find that policies from the Live, Work, Shape, Engage, Move, and Enrich chapters apply. We'll start with Shape. So the SHAPE policies provide future growth by supporting economic development, efficient infrastructure use, fiscal health, and quality development. The proposed rezoning does align with SHAPE policies by offering a vertically integrated proposed mixed-use project within a destination center. And I'd like to just note how the Cary Community Plan describes destination centers. They're described as being Cary's premier mixed-use centers that include integrated mixing of uses, and this includes commercial, office, and residential uses, arranged in a walkable pattern with an active pedestrian realm where buildings front streets. Destination centers are intended to contain the greatest development intensities found in Cary. Uses can be mixed both vertically within multi-story buildings or horizontally on adjacent sites. Within the center, however, by far the greatest emphasis should be on vertical mixing with ground floor retail and offices and housing on upper floors. When we look at the Live chapter, we note that the current rezoning proposal would increase the amount of residential development within this destination center. We also note that the current destination center is developed mostly with non-residential uses when we look at it today. It also addresses Policy 6 through committing to 10 that 10 of the units would be available to renters earning 80% of the area median income, and through the provision to limit the size of 10% of the units. The proposal aligns with Policy 2 as well as 8 and 10 of the work chapter by incorporating residential uses into a destination center, which is currently heavily comprised of office and institutional as well as commercial uses. This will help to provide housing for those who wish to live in close proximity to their workplace. The mix of uses proposed in the development proposes a compact mixed-use development that would help reduce reliance on cars and support alternative modes of transportation. This helps to further Policy 2's emphasis on a vibrant, walkable mixed-use center. The proposal to install 10 electric vehicle charging stations with pre-wiring for 10% of all the spaces does help to further objectives from the Enrich chapter, improving air quality and encouraging changes to the transportation system. We also note that the proposed removal of champion trees with the planting of replacement trees does also interact with policies found to further the urban tree canopy. The applicant's teams also propose custom planting rates for the streetscapes that they will be installing. With regards to the MOVE chapter, the applicant team is committed to one of the 4 recommended improvements in the traffic study, and they've also proposed additional turn lanes along Tryon Road. We note that they partially address recommendations for bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, and note that those can be installed only with the approval of the Property Owners Association for the shopping center. So staff provides the following observations regarding the Imagine Cary Community Plan. First, when we look at the shape chapter, we note that the proposed redevelopment of an existing shopping center into a mixed-use site addresses policy goals of a destination center. And overall, the Imagine Cary Community Plan does note that we will see redevelopment and infill projects so as we have less land to develop in Cary. The proposed architectural conditions will help to address some of the building design and massing considerations for the site. When we look at the work chapter, we find that the mixed-use site will promote activity and economic sustainability. We also note that the 10-foot sidewalks along portions of the site, along with structured parking, will help to improve walkability within the site, which will help to further engage chapter policies. When looking at the shop chapter, we find that it will be further as the proposed development and redevelopment of an existing shopping center. This helps to support existing infrastructure within Cary. We also note that the MOVE chapter, as partially addressed pedestrian and bicycle improvements, will help to address multimodal transportation options. However, the bicycle improvements remain uncertain as to the requirement for the Property Owners Association. The turn lane improvements may help to address traffic considerations. However, as we noted, traffic in this area will continue to grow with or without this project moving forward. Lastly, we note that the Enrich chapter will be furthered through the provision for EV charging infrastructure. The site does propose the removal of 2 champion trees, but will provide replacement plantings per the LDO. So this concludes my presentation. The applicant is here to share their justification with you, and following that, I will be available for any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kate.
Good evening. I'm Jamie Schwedler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant Hines. Along with my colleague, Mark Frederick, and Paul Zarian with Hines, we're also joined by our development team who's available to answer any questions tonight, and that includes Bob Zumwalt, Ryan Fisher, and Travis Fluid. As you know, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into these types of cases, and this one has a tremendous amount of detail. These cases don't come before your board until they've gone through a rigorous review by staff, and we really appreciate staff's not only thorough presentation, but work with us over the 9 months since this has been to a public hearing to be back before you tonight. In that time, we've worked hard to explain the benefits of the rezoning to the community, to increase our commitments on key issues, and we've worked on those that the community has consistently reinforced: stormwater, traffic, and building certainty. Lockmere and other nearby residents have enjoyed this family-friendly center for nearly 40 years, enjoying special occasions, movie nights, ice cream strolls, and many of us are taking for granted that Waverly will always exist in this configuration with or without this rezoning. But the reality is that the Cine Bistro building will become vacant, just like other portions of the center became vacant in decades past for those who remember earlier iterations of Waverly Place. And something will have to go in its place. The addition of apartments and ground floor retail will give the center its best chance of keeping its anchor tenants satisfied and attracting new ones, and is in line with the imagined Cary community plan. It would also allow the applicant to actually improve some of the existing concerns that we've heard since the public hearing and throughout this case that are just inherent with the development of a 37-year-old shopping mall. Without the ability to have this new case and new use, the center could be developed by right without a rezoning for less desirable uses up to a height of 85 feet and without any stormwater protections. This case presents a much better outcome for the citizens of Cary. There's a tremendous amount of community interest in the case, and much of it can be characterized as concerns about existing problems for nearby residents and whether adding apartments will tend to make those problems worse. And it's easy to think about the decision that way, whether approval of the case will, quote, make things worse. The case is squarely consistent with the Cary Community Plan, and that should be the basis of this board's decision tonight. But I'd also note that denying this case will make it much more likely that the issues that we've heard from residents, the traffic, stormwater runoff, and the appearance of Waverly itself will result in a much worse outcome for these residents and Cary overall should the case fail. And that approving this case will actually provide material benefits to the community and tend to make those things better. To do that, I'm going to focus tonight on the aspects of the case that have received the most interest, explain how they are aligned with the Cary Community Plan, and then explain what the difference is between what the applicant could do by right without a rezoning and what we're offering to do. And that way, I hope to explain both to the board and the community that we're focused on the Cary Community Plan, but we've intentionally added elements to try to combat some of the problems that they've identified and how those commitments bring us even closer in line with that plan. So first, I'll focus on building use, height, and certainty. These are each supported by the Future Growth Framework Map designation of the Destination Center. And the chair did a great job explaining what that means and what this board's guiding principles are, and so did Katie, in explaining how that's defined. To be clear, this is the town's designation. It's not a designation that we're seeking. It's already in place based on a 3-year plan that was initially adopted several years ago and has been recently updated. And in that plan, the community has already determined that the highest and most intense uses in Cary should be located here. That is how the destination center is defined. 750 multifamily units and 30,000 square feet of commercial, plus the 4 to 7 story heights, are squarely in line with that guidance and SHAPE chapter policies 2 and 3, which encourage placing higher density housing within destination centers and on redevelopment sites just like this. Policy 4 focuses on expanding housing choices within those mixed-use centers. No housing exists there today, and there hasn't been any new housing in the area in quite some time, so we're fulfilling those in a unique way and directly in line with the policies of the Destination Center. The rezoning area is not adjacent to any residential uses. And in fact, the closest residential uses are over 2 football fields away and separated by a medical office building and substantial tree cover. That's shown in your visibility packet attached to your the appendix, which shows that these closest residents have a significant tree stand that stands between them and the closest area where they might be able to experience the 7-story buildings. Nevertheless, following the public hearing, we added a maximum height of 85 feet. Again, we could do that by right today, but we're adding that certainty to say that's not just 7 stories, but an 85-foot cap. We also ran a drone in the summer when the trees were in full bloom to see what you could see from the nearby Lockmere residence. And then we ran 2 balloon tests that Katie explained both in February and March. Based on those balloon tests, which are also in your packet, it was clear that the balloon was not visible from Lac Lamond, Somerview Lane, or Ambiance Court. These are where most people at the public hearing expressed a desire to have an interest in the case or were concerns about the impact on the case, and we deliberately took those pictures and included them in the report from each of those cul-de-sacs that were closest in, so you could see that there's very little impact visually. Again, by right, we could go to 85 feet maximum if we set back our buildings 35 feet from the edge of the pavement. So what we're asking to do here is we're putting an 85-foot cap and bringing the buildings between 10 and 25 feet from the pavement. So we're just getting 10 feet closer to the pavement, but doing what we could otherwise do by right. So we understand and appreciate the concern over 7 stories, but 7 stories could be built there today with an 85-foot building just 10 feet further back from the edge of the property line. To provide more certainty following the public hearing, we also increased our masonry component to 40%. We committed to various roof variations and modulation of building facades, included balconies, and committed to separating the buildings between pods 1 and 2 to break up the massing. Those were all in response to citizen requests for greater certainty about what the buildings could look like and how they would be experienced within the center. We also committed to screening the parking decks with the units, as Katie explained. And then we produced renderings and presented those to the neighbors on several occasions in order to show how those new buildings would fit into the form of the existing center, both in height and massing. We produced a website with video explanations of each of these commitments, and that's been viewed over 8,000 times since it was made available to the public in December. None of the increased architectural standards that I just listed are required by the code, so none of those would be delivered if this were to be developed by right. Approving the case instead presents more certainty that the high-quality nature of Waverly Place as we know it today will remain and be enhanced. Second, with respect to traffic and circulation, the TAR was done in June 2023 when this case was filed, and it was determined that our uses only increased traffic by 2% in the AM peak and less than 0.5% in the PM peak. We understand there's a lot of existing congestion, but it's important to understand how much our specific uses are contributing. In this case, it's very little. The TAR recommended the applicant work with the staff to install improvements on New Waverly, Colonnades Way, and Advent Court, and more distant intersection improvements were also suggested, but the traffic for our site, again, made up such a small portion of that they were either infeasible or on land that we didn't control and were not included as commitments in this case. After lengthy discussions with the staff on land we do control, we committed to those buffered bike lanes that Katie spoke about on New Waverly and the shared lanes on Colonnades Way, both of which are important because we want people staying in the center and using new modes of transportation that don't exist today. There are no bike facilities within the Waverly Place Shopping Center. We also committed to that new 15-foot streetscape along Colonnades Way in New Waverly, which has new seating opportunities that don't exist today, sidewalks, and a nicer kind of sprawling area where people can linger and experience that don't exist along New Waverly Place in a meaningful way. Each of these elements are all supported by the SHAPE chapter, Policy 2 goal of providing a highly functional, walkable, mixed-use destination center and adding bike lanes without complicating traffic issues. It's also supported by the MOVE chapter, Policy 2, applying multimodal street designs. After meeting with residents who took issue with some of the assumptions of the TAR, we reran the analysis last month, assuming no internal capture and not removing the theater trips. Our traffic engineer can explain a little bit more what that means, but suffice it to say, it's even more conservative than the assumptions that were in the original TAR, assuming that the traffic was more intense than we believe it would be. And this only results in a 1% increase in both the AM peak and PM peak hour site impact. It's simply just not enough to justify new improvements in this situation and not enough to really change the game in terms of what we're offering. Regardless, we still committed to extending the 2 left turn lanes on Tryon and added these new commitments since the public hearing. 1 turn lane southbound on Kildare Farm and 1 at New Waverly, providing that turn lane left as you approach Chick-fil-A to provide more stacking for cars and making a real difference not only in the ability to stack, but providing more capacity for the through traffic on Tryon and preventing some of those backups. Without this case, none of those improvements are guaranteed to happen. And none of these existing traffic problems will get better without town projects using taxpayer money to fund them or some other means other than the Waverly Place redevelopment. Number 3, stormwater. Runoff caused a considerable amount of concern at the public hearing, and much of this discussion centered on the fact that the area to be rezoned is largely a 1988 parking lot. It's largely impervious, and staff explained that not only this site, but many of the surrounding communities were developed before our current stormwater rules, and so runoff was treated a much different way back then. Today, under those existing rules, the water sheet flows into culverts and then drains into areas downstream without any storage, without any protection, without any filtration. That's just the way that those were done years and years ago. And so while stormwater leaving our zoning site only makes up 15% of the water that eventually drains into Loch Lomond and in Lochmere, the residents raised concerns about whether redevelopment would actually make their erosion issues worse downstream, and concerns about the dredging costs that they currently bear. So we went one step further in our commitments, and we committed to using the green stormwater infrastructure or low-impact development techniques to reduce peak stormwater flow leaving our site. And we did that in a way that it would be the same extent as if we had a 10% reduction in our impervious surface. What that means is we're treating more water and we're holding it longer and releasing it in a way that's more conducive to preventing that sediment from gathering. Following the hearing, we met with several citizen groups and with Lochmere's Neighborhood Association to explore stormwater improvements, and that resulted in the condition not only offering the 10% reduction, but treating it to a 25-year storm, so a certain storm event to provide a little more certainty about how much water would be retained and then treated before released. This is all consistent with the SERV chapter, Policy 3, which encourages environmentally responsible stormwater management, and approving the commitment in the zoning will set a precedent for other developments to follow suit. Policy 5 also recommends the use of green building techniques to add green infrastructure resources, which the zoning provides through the use of green stormwater infrastructure. So all of those commitments supported squarely by the Cary Community Plan. We then explained to the neighbors that due to the amount of volume of water that we would have to be treated and located on site, stormwater would have to be in underground vaults on our property that would treat the water in a storm event and gather it, kind of let the sediment filter to the bottom, remove trash, remove debris that's leaving the site today, and then slowly be released over time. And that accomplishes 2 things. It holds the water for a period of time and releases it after the storm has subsided, so you don't have the gushing or the flooding that you typically have in a storm event quite to the same extent. And then the water released has less debris by nature because it's been filtered. So each of those things will help all of our downstream property owners, but specifically the concerns raised by the Lochmere residents. Both are a massive improvement to the existing conditions, which just provide the sheet flowing into culverts. We also have just reached an agreement with the Lochmere Association outside of the zoning case based on some of their erosion control measures that have failed over time, and we've agreed to contribute $100,000 towards the association to help study how those erosion control measures could be better implemented and how they would actually be implemented. That was just reached last week, and it's outside of the zoning case. It's not a zoning condition, you'll see, because it's off-site, so we can't make that a condition, but it is something that they have endorsed and emailed the board about. Again, without this case being approved, nothing changes. Stormwater flows into those culverts just like it does today, and it's not held or treated. And so adjacent property owners would remain entirely responsible for the cost and design of their own control systems, just like they are today. All of this is in condition to the many features cited in the staff report, and Katie did a great job with the many, many details in this case. I'd just like to highlight a few that are consistent with the Cary Community Plan, that all new parking will be in structured decks with the exception of some parallel parking for convenience, squarely in line with SHAPE Chapter Policy 6. We're committing to the tent rent-restricted units at 80% AMI for 20 years, plus 10% of all units being restricted to that 750 square foot limitation, which makes it more likely that they will rent for less, and that condition, of course, is in perpetuity because they're built at that 750 square footage. This provides an option not only for persons to live at a reduced rent, but also for seniors to looking to downsize that don't want to maintain the 3,000 square foot home or the 2,000 square foot home in Lochmere and have an ability to age in place in their community. All of this is in line with the LIVE chapter, Policy 6, which encourages incorporation of workforce housing, and Policy 2, which speaks to more housing choices within destination centers. The commitment of ground floor retail and commercial in Pod 1 is consistent with the Destination Center encouragement of vertically integrated uses, as Katie mentioned, SHAPE Chapter Policy 3, and encourages mixed-use development. It's also consistent, of course, with the shop chapter because we're revitalizing a portion of an existing shopping area that has been a little bit dated and in need of uplifting. The 10 EV chargers and 10% of all parking being EV ready, in addition to the 20% more bike parking than the LDO supports, than the LDO requires, is supported by the SERVE chapter, Policy 7. And with the 3 times community gathering area that we're providing is all supported by the Engage chapter, the PRCR plan that Katie mentioned. This case is detailed, and it's received a lot of interest. But the simple sum is that the case is overwhelmingly consistent with the Imagine Cary plan, and the staff highlights 6 consistency areas in 6 different chapters, noting that the uses and heights, along with the commitments to a mixed-use project with sustainable infrastructure like bike lanes and stormwater infrastructure, align with the intensity expected in a destination center and chosen by the council. We understand the concerns on traffic, stormwater, and building certainty, and that it's tempting to feel that an approval will make things worse, so to speak. But if residents and the city, and the town want to see those issues improve, the solution is to approve this case. Without this case, existing traffic and stormwater issues will have to be paid for by others. We urge you to move Waverly forward with a recommendation for approval because it's not only consistent with the Cary Community Plan, but it would allow the 3rd evolution of this beloved shopping center to be part of the solution. Thank you for your time, and we'll be available to answer any questions.
Terrific, thank you. So, sorry, I lost my place here. So at this point, you know, we want to remind each of us as we consider our questions that the plan's in place to divide the development in Cary. As you think about your questions, keep in mind how this proposed case fits or does not fit in the plan. When making a motion, it would be helpful to describe how you see your motion impacting the Cary Community Plan. I'm assuming the answer will be yes. Do any board members have any questions? And so, if so, maybe I would start with, we can start with Ruben. Let's start with Sal down here and then just work our way down.
I reserve the right to ask more questions.
All right, that's fine. I'm sure there'll be some dialogue.
Just on the parking, the floor limits 4 to 7 floors would include the parking deck floors, right?
Yes, that's correct.
With the 85 feet. Okay. I guess I just want to be clear on, without this rezoning, what could the maximum sort of densities look like?
Yeah, so let me toggle back to the list of allowable uses. So I guess one key distinction to call out is there would be no residential density allowed under the current zoning. So the current zoning is general commercial. So it would allow, you know, this list, plus there's a few extra that we couldn't fit on here, but this is just to highlight some of the uses allowed in general commercial. So many uses within general commercial. This rezoning would be, you know, limiting the commercial uses, but introducing the residential uses, which are currently not allowed under general commercial.
That's all I've got right now. Thank you.
Chris, go ahead. We'll just go down this way.
So just to confirm a few things, you said that the amusement center, was that use only allowed if the Cine Bistro building stays? Is that what I heard? Or-
Yes, that's, yes, that's the way that the condition is worded. Let me see if I can pull that up really quickly. Yeah, so both amusement establishment and commercial recreation are allowed with, you know, with caveats, and those were built into the PDP, that these would only be allowed if it's using the existing building in Pod 1, and that's at Cine Bistro site.
Okay. And then you said that the existing amphitheater could go away, could stay, because it's not part of.
Right, yes, right. So that is, and I'll pull that one up. Right, so you can see just in proximity to the site, it's right, you know, right adjacent to the assemblage that we're looking at, but not part of it. So, you know, I think it's safe to say that, you know, the people that would live here and shop here would be using that community gathering area. But because it's outside of the zoning conditions, outside of the zoning area, we don't have a zoning condition that would require that it remain community gathering area.
But any change to it would come back as a new case, right?
Yeah, if they were to rezone, if they were to redevelop under the existing zoning, which is general commercial, then it wouldn't necessarily need to go before the board through a rezoning process.
And I may have missed this, but was there any mention of solar being used anywhere on this?
There's no commitment to solar.
Okay. Was there a reason why?
I'd like to, I don't know if the applicant team would like to elaborate on that, but it'd be probably best for them to speak to that.
Sure. There's a lot of concern over the environmental portions of the site, and so we focused more on the stormwater and the green stormwater infrastructure. It's not something I think we'd rule out, but it's not been as much. There's been a lot of public interest in this case and a lot of requests, and so we're trying to focus on what those have been to date, and solar hadn't really been a primary one of those.
Okay. And then the champion trees that you mentioned, I didn't see. Where are those located roughly? You can just point to them or tell
Yeah.
me where they are on the map.
See if I can. Yeah, roughly in this area where you see some of the tree canopy where my mouse is hovering
Okay.
over.
All right. I think that's all I've got for now. Oh, no, I did have one more. The building, can you go to the slide that had the parking deck screening?
Yes.
Now, the pictures at the bottom left, was that primary or secondary?
Secondary.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, I'm good.
Mike, you have any additional questions?
Yeah, just some additional elaboration on amusement establishment and commercial recreation. Could you provide the board with a couple other examples of those types of businesses?
Yeah, so I think just to give some examples of what amusement establishment would be, it would generally be a location where you can come, it's indoors, you can play games. I think maybe some examples could be like a trampoline park or someplace where there's like arcades inside, generally those types of uses.
That's all I got.
Sean, do you have any questions?
I do. With the bike lane being hinged on the property owners association, it's just a condition that's oddly to be able to be enforced. So where are we in that process?
We originally had that as just an outright condition, but because it's in the New Waverly Place and Colonnades Way, portions of those are in the common area where other owners have rights. Today, Heinz controls the majority of those rights, so if the development went forward today, that wouldn't be an issue. But if, for example, one of the portions was sold to someone else, they'd have to make sure they get their consent, and that's all that we had to provide for.
Okay.
That's not the plan. The plan is to develop as soon as we can get the markets figured out.
Thank you. It says that there's only 10 workforce housing units at 80% NEMI, which is less than 5%, even of the 300. That seems extraordinarily low, because most of the ones that have come before us have been at least 5% AMI, and to me, that isn't consistent with SHAPE. Being able to, I see there's, 10% are under 750, but, to me, that doesn't seem that it's consistent, with that part of the, diversity, for plans.
Yeah, as always, it's, the applicant's choice if they wish to add a workforce housing or affordable housing commitment. To your point, it is somewhat lower than what we've seen recently on projects of similar sizes. That's the number that they've, proposed ultimately. And then, of course, the provision to limit the square footage of a certain number of units to partner with that. But, yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, Diane?
Can you speak to the, I think you had mentioned Go Cary and the lines, how those relate to this? How does that change with this?
It shouldn't
doesn't
change. Now, generally, whenever we do have new development that's proposed, especially, workforce development, multifamily units, our transit team is always evaluating where new development is going in, and that could interact with our planning for and provision for bus routes, bus stops. So they do participate in rezoning processes and development plan reviews, so that it could go into future considerations as they're evaluating new bus routes and stops in the area.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Ken?
So with the general commercial that could be in these two pods, that could be 85 feet tall, and it could fit in those broad categories, if those parking lots were developed under the existing conditions, would they be required to treat stormwater differently than just running off the surface that's there? Would they have to provide the same, less? What would happen with stormwater if it were redeveloped with general commercial and 85-foot tall buildings and parking decks? What would they have to do?
Great question. We happen to have Lisa Booz, our Stormwater Development and Floodplain Administrator here, so I'd like to ask her to speak to that item.
Great. Just happened to be here.
Yeah.
So if it was redeveloped under today's regulations, it would only have to address stormwater increases from the existing condition. So as long as there was no net increase in impervious, they wouldn't have to do anything. They would just have to match the existing conditions and the existing runoff.
So with two big paved parking lots, or well, at least one's big paved, I guess the other one's not all paved parking lot, but pod one is generally a parking lot. They wouldn't have to do anything, but just, they could put buildings there because it's the same amount of impervious.
As long as it's the same, yep.
Okay, that answers that question. Thank you. Solar is one of my hot buttons as well, and I think that's, whether it's been brought up or, again, if we're going to be there, I think that would be a wonderful use. There's something that's in the staff report. I think there's a mistake here, and I've been trying to reconcile it, and I didn't have time this afternoon to call the other meetings, but I don't know how you refer to the agenda packet, how you can pull stuff up. Are you able to pull something up? I've got it reprinted here, but I don't know what you can pull.
I'm not able to pull it up on the big screen, but I do have the staff report printed, and I could flip to.
Can you jump to if yours is in color, if you could jump to that green, there's a shop policies that's in the D1.
Okay.
But your D1s aren't numbered. If you started numbering the D1s, it would be easier to find it. But
Okay.
but you could go past your work and it's got a map and you've got your shape. It's in the order in the same color as the Cary Community Plan. It's after your champion trees. It's a couple of pages after that. And then you get a green shop that's about half, almost the bottom of a page.
Okay.
So I thought, well, Jim, I'm looking at the wrong Cary Community Plan. These three shop policies are from the work policy. Group A, grow a sustainable and diversifying workforce, enhance the locational appeal to businesses and workers, retain and grow existing Cary businesses. These are straight from the work section, not from the shop section.
Yeah, I can certainly take a look at that. I'll have to pull up the Cary Community Plan and do like a cross analysis of the two, but I'm happy to look into that.
Yeah, I printed it, and the three policies from the shop plan are facilitate development of underperforming commercial centers, focus commercial uses within commercial mixed-use centers, destination centers, downtown and commercial centers, and policy 3 is support the development of a limited number of destination centers and commercial mixed-use centers. And I know it's the right one because it's the green, the color stayed the same.
Yeah.
So somehow or other, it says shop, but they went back a few pages and pulled the work things.
Yeah, thank you for catching that. We can certainly look into that and address that.
So, and it wasn't mentioned, Jamie did not mention any of that, so I know somehow it's in the staff report, and she didn't bring it forward, so I'm assuming that she wasn't presenting it to be the work things in the shop. But I do want to see how it fits. So we're supposed to facilitate redevelopment of underperforming commercial center. So I'm trying to find a definition of underperforming commercial center. The parking lots seem full all the time, and we're hearing that dire predictions of if we don't change, it's going to die. Some of that comes from some emails I've gotten, and some of it was not die, but some of it was like underperforming. They mentioned, and if you don't redevelop it, you have problems. You can look up in Now Kildare Farm Road. You can go to the old Barnes and Nobles across where St. Michael's Church used to be and see that there's virtually nothing there. So there are definitely some underperforming areas in Cary. I wouldn't say that the Whole Foods and Waverly is underperforming unless you're saying everything always could be better. But if we're facilitating underperforming and trying to focus on underperforming, I think we've missed the mark. We should focus on the underperforming areas. Right now, the mall area, Cary Town Center, is really underperforming with all that dirt and a Belk's building in the middle of it. And I realize we're supposed to focus effort on it, so I do want to put effort on it, but for shopping. But we are supposed to also help the existing businesses be successful. So if you introduce competing businesses right next door, obviously, if Heinz owns a lot of it, they're not going to hurt themselves. But we are, it seems pretty dense there. So I've got some concerns about that. I don't know that it fits it definitely does not fit the shop. And it's kind of like the check boxes we've talked about before, is that we check all the ones that it checks. We don't put NA for the ones that aren't applicable, but then we don't X all the ones that it fails to fulfill. But that's one that I think it fails to fulfill, or it's marginally.
I was going to point out, yeah, just thank you for pointing that out. I do think the analysis still analyzes the shop policies. I just think that the policies that were listed in the box may just be incorrect policies, and we can certainly get that fixed. I think
At
may have
least
just done
two of
like
them
a
are
copy-paste.
because, you're two of them fit. One of them
Yeah.
is underperforming. I might say it's underperforming. And then when I looked up the definite, and I was on the webpage for the Cary Community Plan that shows what the destination center, which you had already, I think you read what the destination center was supposed to be. I wonder how we define high density. 300 to 750 is what would we say if we said, well, high density is, let's put 6,000 units there. You say, whoa, that's like ultra high density, but there's no measurements. We just have a feeling of what high density is. And to me, this is how I'm trying to say, does it fulfill the destination center? And is 750 too much? Is 300 too much? Is 150 right? Or is 250 right? And it comes back to economics. So it's economics more so for the developer maybe, and then of course, if you're building buildings or building apartments so they can shop in your shopping center, each hand's washing the others. Obviously a perfect fit, and I understand that. And if they've done the research and think that they need 750 that it's the right number, that may be the right number for them. It may not be the right number for high density. And it may not be the right number for a place that's never had residential. And Jamie, you addressed that. Okay, yeah, that'd be great, thanks. That's what I was getting to a question, but that's.
I'll start by adding, and then Jamie, feel free to jump in. You're correct, the destination center policies do not speak specifically to what densities would be appropriate. Instead, they focus more on like the types of uses. It encourages mixing of uses. It does encourage building frontages, like buildings to be pulled up to streets, active and walkable areas. It does also speak to building height. So we look to mixing of uses, siding of buildings, and design elements to ultimately meet those densities. But you're correct, it doesn't actually give an ultimate threshold for what those numbers are, and turn it over
Okay.
to Jamie.
Ken, I think you ended up answering both of your questions with the second one. You mentioned, the developer looking at how you add people to the site to enliven the business, and I think you were struggling with keeping the existing businesses going. We're not saying that Whole Foods is necessarily struggling or that the commercial areas are struggling, but Cine Bistro is. In the time that we filed this zoning case almost 2 years ago, Netflix, as you know, has taken over the world, and people just aren't going to these kind of sit-in, dine-in movie theaters like they were, and so they're struggling more than they were at the beginning of the case. And so what we're trying to do is, now that all these investments in other parts of the center have been coming along, and the play space that has been our most successful part, we're not touching that anytime soon. We want to make sure that this part can have its next life too, and putting people close to all of those proximities is the best way to make sure that those businesses have a steady, supply of customers to go out to dinner, to go eat ice cream and try the wine shop. And so in that way, the revitalization of the center really does fulfill the shop policies, because we're taking a portion of it that's not doing well, and we're trying to give it its next life so that it doesn't impact the rest of the tenants. But it also answers your second question of, how much, when we're doing that, how much do we infuse? And Katie's absolutely right. With the heights that are recommended, kind of up to 7 stories, and the most intense uses, one of 7 places in the town allowing these intensive uses, we look at that, and we also look, how are we going to make sure that everybody that lives here and shops here has enough parking? And the only way to do that on this site, we're taking away a lot of surface parking. We still have to make sure all the other patrons get their parking, and so that we're not kind of suffocating the existing retail. And so the only way to do that and to add people back in is for the parking to be structured. And so when you look at a case like this, you do have other cases that maybe have solar and maybe have other things, but this case has the majority of its parking in structured parking decks. And those are probably the most expensive part when you're looking at how to come up with the amount of new housing to put. You've got to be able to park not only those people, but the rest of the people in the center. And you look at those costs, and then you look at, okay, how dense is dense enough for this area, and we can make sure that we can still park it, and we can still afford to do that, plus all the other stormwater benefits and things that we've talked about tonight. So there's not a kind of magic number, but it's that balance of making sure we're providing new residents, we're providing new customers, we're invigorating this portion of the area, and we're doing it at the right size scale, which ironically, the height we could do today. We're just doing it in a much better way by committing ourselves to all of the conditions that we talked about tonight.
Okay, that's helpful. So I know you're only making conditions based on what you're doing on site. I did have some thoughts about how all these people are gonna get their groceries from Waverly without having to leave get their groceries from Whole Foods without having to leave the parking lot. I guess they could order them on Amazon, they could deliver them to their door, although it's only a parking lot, but there's gotta be carts and accessory things, and I'm sure you can work the details on that. And I think that's an important thing when you have the residents so close by. It's almost like a downtown thing where people are going to be pulling their little carts, I think, with their groceries. But is there a good path? And since you can't do stuff off-site, you'll just have to, since you're trying to facilitate all that and make Whole Foods, keep them going and keep everything else going, I'm sure you'll figure that out. And so, and I guess the last thing is that in the struggling with the congestion and what it can increase if it's only, how will the neighboring, it'll help Whole Foods to have 750 more customers. It's not going to help the people in Lockmere if they can't get to Whole Foods in line. It'll be almost like going down Cary Parkway at Trader Joe's, where people choose not to shop there because the parking lot's full and there's lines out the door. They're standing out line waiting with carts outside. So I'm not sure it helps the Lockmere neighbors to add 750 residents from the Whole Foods side, because that's fully utilized. Like you said, it's already fully utilized. I can see where it'll give other businesses and give them other options, but I dare say you're not going to put another shopping center there. Another grocery store there. So those are my concerns. I don't know if there's an answer to that, but that's where I struggle.
Ruben?
I didn't want to go first because I got 2 pages of questions. So I wanted to see if everybody else, hit some of these.
There you
and they've been touched on. Since I scared them with my 2 pages of questions, I want to emphasize that I think Waverly is probably the best designed shopping center I've ever been to.
Good.
And I'm reminded of the Good to Great story. It's already very good. I know they could do less under existing zoning, but it looks like they're striving for great. A lot of the things they're including in here are things I have passionately wanted to see in developments. I made a comment to a friend months ago about the only thing missing here is residential.
Right.
And here it comes. I'm a little bit curious, I guess this leads into one of my questions, is why was the traffic study re-performed without the internal capture?
Yeah, I'll let the applicant to you. speak.
Because I bet there's going to be a lot of internal capture.
I thought I was going to get off easy tonight, and then Ruben make sure I earned my money. Travis flew it with Travis flew it with Kinley Horn Associates. So we did not perform the TAR. We're working on behalf of the applicant. I completely agree with you. There will be a lot of internal capture. Like, this is the right place to be doing residential in that regard. But there were a lot of concerns expressed by staff, by neighbors about how to word this. Staff was asking for a lot of commitments related to bike and pedestrian, some of which we're doing, some of additional things we're doing, some of which we're not able to do. For example, staff was asking for wider sidewalks throughout the development, besides just the zoning area. And some of those places we're just not able to do. There are retaining walls, there are street trees that would have to be removed, things like that. But there's an extensive bike ped network, so I think we'll be okay. But another thing that came up was there was a reduction in trips for the movie theater, particularly in the AM peak hour, that may have been a little high. So to address those, we just went as conservative as we could possibly be and said, if we do not do the theater reduction, if we do not account for any internal capture between these apartments and the rest of the development, it will still work pretty much the same as it did in the TAR. Slight increases in delay, but again, trying to be ultra conservative, and it really doesn't trigger any additional improvements. So that's why we did it that way. It's just like, even in the very worst case that could possibly happen, it's still going to be okay.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify, too, that when you say very conservative, you're talking about maximum traffic, not a minimum.
Correct.
That's for everybody's
Yes.
benefit. Okay. Was there a percentage of trips attributed to bicycles and pedestrians?
I don't believe there was,
Okay.
other than just internal capture, which some of that will be bike and ped, but no other reductions for
Oh, I would hope
bicycle.
all of the internal captures. Bike and ped.
Yeah, but even as somebody, there are a lot of, a couple of auto centers, and somebody may drive their car from the parking deck over to the AAA car center to get it serviced.
That's true. Well, yeah.
You know.
While we're on the traffic and bike ped things, I think you're saying that there is a commitment to the bike ped infrastructure in the zoning area, but you can't speak to improvements outside the zoning area because you have to have POA approval, Property Owners Association approval.
Yeah, so, I don't know if the mouse how does the mouse show up? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so the sidewalk commitments are throughout the zoning area. There are a couple of places. Do we have the exhibit? Should I just scan through? I don't know which way it is.
I can locate that.
There's some crosswalks committed to. We are committed to doing the bike lanes along New Waverly Place for the extent from Advent Court to Colonnades Way, for the entire length
Okay.
of that stretch. Not just,
Protected bike lane?
they will be buffered bike
Okay.
lanes.
No vertical element?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so the red lines are the extent of the bike lanes.
So this is the plan if the property owners agree?
Yes, and as Jamie said, right now, Heinz is the majority owner, so they do not technically need approval. But if, for some reason, somebody were to redevelop and have more of the site, we're just covering our bases and not committing to something we can't
So this is
do.
next thing I got is not really a question, but a comment. I know access to Lockmere was a concern. I see what, to me, it looks like a potential, there's a cul-de-sac, I think it was Summer Winds, comes closest to the back of the medical park. Might be a good place for future multi-use path connection. There was a comparison today to Trader Joe's. There's not much parking over there. It's a very busy place. I live across the street from there. I can definitely walk and go into a store much quicker than I can park, and maneuver in and out of that place. So I want to put in a big plug for the bike ped infrastructure. Let's see if that's all the bike stuff. Yeah, I agree with you about it being a vibrant bike ped community. I think you've got a lot of use there. I've accessed the place multiple times by bicycle. It's too far to walk, but it's not too far to bike. And I think the potential there's already a lot of use. I see kids over there on bicycles. I see them at the intersection of Tryon and Kildare using the signals. So it already has good connection to a lot of residential areas. Just to say a word about the density question, I don't think there is an absolute, but I do think it serves the interest of the Cary community to increase density for the fact that it, provable fact that it does increase all business units within a certain area by having more people present. Most of my questions remaining had to do with the stormwater percentages. Those were hard to follow as far as percent of this, percent of that. Maybe I can interpret, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think I heard that 25% of the current, or maybe it was 15% of a 25-year flood will be captured in vaults and released more slowly.
Yeah, and I'll let the applicant's team speak to that item.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Ryan Fisher with BGE. Yeah, so the condition is that the 25-year storm, we're comparing it to the 10% reduction in impervious area on the site today.
Okay.
To the 25-year storm.
And the current impervious area is close to 100%?
It's actually around 80 because
80?
it has that champion tree area.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. This may not be your question, but Chris already asked about the champion trees. I was curious as to the diameter and the species that we're losing there. This will help give an estimate of how long it takes the replacement trees to make it.
I don't know if I have that handy in front of me, but that's something I could certainly follow up with moving forward. Let me see if I can. Does anyone on the applicant team happen to have the existing condition? Yeah. I was afraid it was too small, but I see a big plan back there, so that's perfect.
Big enough.
Good evening, Bob Zumwalt with Kimley Horn. The two trees in question, there's a 32.6-inch white oak and a 33.5-inch white oak.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Another question on the size of the residential. This question is to give an idea of what the higher rents are probably going to run. 750 square foot or less, but I'm wondering what the maximum square footage apartment is likely to be.
That's not been proposed as part of the rezoning, so we don't know that. The applicant's team may be able to speak to that, but they may not know that at this time either. So I think if we were to speculate, that may be too far outside of what the zoning bounds could really hold at this point.
Maybe related to that is there a projection in today's dollars of what a 750 square foot unit would rent for, and what would 80% of the, I don't know the acronym, median?
Area median income, yeah.
What would that be?
Do not have those numbers typically in front of us, and that's generally because those can just fluctuate so very much.
I'm just looking
depending
for a
on month to
measure of how affordable is it really going to be? Like, could somebody who's working in one of the restaurants afford to live there?
Yeah, so I will say, just in generalities, 80% of the area median income, we generally refer to that as workforce housing, so it's not, deep affordability, which would be closer to like 60% or even less. So yeah, generally, someone who, who's employed, has a decent job, would be qualifying for the 80% area median income.
This could be my last question. I know there's a map up there about the bus routes around and through the property, and there was another bus route question, but I didn't understand if those are only possible future proposed routes or if there's some existing routes that serve Waverly. Because I'm kind of familiar with the route of Route 5, and it doesn't go through Waverly.
Yes, so Route 5 goes nearby, but there's also some Go Triangle Transit routes that are in the area, and those are shown in the yellow. But then, as I was noting earlier, too, both our transit staff and regional transit staff do evaluate new development frequently, and that could, play into planning for future transit routes as well as transit stops.
So is the developer proposing any transit stops, transit shelters to be built?
Currently not with this proposal.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, this is just my lack of understanding. What's an activated rooftop?
So this would be an amenity area that would be on a rooftop. So generally, it would be an area that you can access that would be on, the top of one of the buildings. Whether or not it's open to the public,
Okay,
yet to be
that's what I was
determined.
trying to understand, is could it be a commercial use or would it be for the residents? And I was trying to understand that.
Yeah, it could be either. It's undefined at this stage in the game.
Okay. As we mentioned, a number of questions came from residents, and one that I saw a couple of times that I've not heard addressed is, what are the evaluations to the impact for emergency services? I know there's a hospital nearby and a fire station nearby, but at what point does the density impact what we provide by way of emergency services?
Yeah, so I will say that we do coordinate fairly closely with emergency service providers, and that includes, our departments here with the town of Cary, but also, with Wake County EMS as well, to provide our future land use plans as well as, active development, and they are making decisions and future planning decisions based on that information.
Right. Colonnades Way, I know a portion of this, and I think it's actually the portion that's included here in the rezoning. The Chick-fil-A is an out parcel across the way there. Today, there's a divided median, and are any of the improvements envisioning anything that would impact or improve traffic conditions on that section of Colonnades Way?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe first invite Pritham Khanda to speak to that item, and then maybe the applicant's engineer. Which one?
As you can see on this slide, there are a few changes to the existing pedestrian crossings. One of the pedestrian crossings that's out there is going to be removed. No, I think two of them are going to be removed, and there's going to be a new crosswalk there across from Chick-fil-A that's going to be placed in a better location.
But there's no turn lane or anything, like, that median probably stays there. Basically, there are times of day where it's almost impassable because of the line getting in and out of Chick-fil-A. I didn't know if this was an opportunity to potentially, mitigate some of those things, but just a question. I didn't know if it was part of the consideration.
Yeah, as of now, it's only marked, it's only committed as a crosswalk.
Understood.
At the time of development plan, we can work with the development team to see if any
Just noted, yeah.
enhancements can be applied there.
Sure. I think that's it with regard to the traffic. We mentioned, I think, a custom planting, and I didn't really see specifically what that meant with regard to replanting maybe where the champion trees area is. At the end of the day, that custom planting is going to be equal to or greater than what would be required. Just elaborate a little bit of what it means to be a custom planting.
Yeah, so the custom planting rates actually proposed along the streetscapes that will be along Colonnades, New Waverly, and Circulation A. And so they proposed essentially certain spacings for trees that will be placed along the streetscape. Essentially, trees will be about 35 feet spaced apart. They will also be working to evaluate the soil area needed for the planting of the trees. If there's not enough soil area, then they would be providing systems such as soil cells for the tree provision. So that varies from our ordinance, but it's more customized to that 15-foot streetscape that they're providing with this development.
And I really only have two more questions. So if this were 85 feet and it were office, which I believe would be allowed today under its current, how similar would that density be to a residential?
As far as
Generally, I mean, it may not be exact, but if I had an 85-foot office building, I'm going to have a lot of individual rooms, and you think that the density may or may not be consistent with or slightly more than, just the time of day and the travel times would be different.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assumption?
Good question. As far as just traffic implications.
Just in how, the number of people that would be on site on any given day, if it were office as opposed to residential, obviously it might be 5 days versus 7, but just those two uses seem to create the same amount of density potentially to me.
Yeah, so because of the current zoning, it could be redeveloped. Office is one of the allowable uses, so they would have to meet today's current standards for for building height, as well as parking. And so, based on that, you would be able to determine how many units are for, office suites that it could actually hold. But yeah, in general, looking at that could be somewhat comparable, but hard to say
definitively.
since it's a little hypothetical, yeah.
And then how high is the tallest building on property today about? Is it about 60 feet? And we're talking about 25 feet of additional height? Just trying to get an idea of where we are today and where we're going. It's already allowed at 85, but how much additional building will there be?
Yeah, I was going to see if anyone from the applicant team happens to have that. Perfect.
Jeff, the answer to the earlier question is there's about 4 people per 1,000 square feet in office and about 2 per 1,000 in residential. Paul just mentioned that to me, and that's the metric they kind of use. And then the answer to the height is that the top of the Cine Bistro is about 55 feet. When we flew the drone, we kind of stopped there and then went up.
Okay. And then just to comment, Ken, with regard to the type of development, I would say, you had a Taco Mac that didn't survive in this area and ended up with the Chase. There's been a lot of other things that have not been successful in this area. So with regard to shopping, I could see this being one that has had some stress and it's been redeveloped multiple times over the period of time. But those are my only questions. And the only other comment I have is at the end of the day, we appreciate any effort that's been given to help from an affordability standpoint, but 1.3% is light in comparison to what we've seen at other places. If there was any further consideration of that along the way, could you get closer to the 5% number that Sean mentioned? I don't know that that's the end all of what will make a deciding factor, but I just wanted to have that on record. So at this point, unless there are any additional questions, go ahead, Ruben.
They did give the percent increase for AM and PM peak traffic, but from what I've seen, the time you can't find a parking place is lunch. So I'm wondering the comparison of increase in traffic with the development over, say, 11 to 2, if that was looked at.
I don't believe we've done any analysis of the lunch conditions.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, along those same lines, would there be shared parking between residential and commercial so that we could get available parking when there's shortages?
I'm going to do my best to speak to this, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. So within the parking decks, there will be parking for the commercial uses, I think.
Sorry, there will or will not?
There will.
There will.
Be parking for commercial, at least I don't know the amounts, I don't know if that's been determined. I think there is a desire to have a gate at some point in the deck for residential only above that point. And there may be a determination of some is shared, some is exclusive to the residential, but that is the current plan.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can make one comment towards that, I did live downtown for a little while. The parking lot between the Sky House and the Edison Lofts shares parking based on time of day, and so they each have a different peak hour demand, so that can be worked out pretty good.
Yes, we have been looking at shared parking and making sure that we provide enough parking for all the existing uses, and it's going to be a bit of back and forth if this moves forward, taking out one of the parking lots and building the other and making sure there's enough parking for all the users as it moves forward.
If I could put in one more plug for convenient deck parking, there's a relatively new parking deck at Duke Hospital that actually tells you from outside the deck what the available parking is. And then when you get in there, there's like a green check if it's vacant, a red X if it's not. It actually greatly improves the circulation when people know where it is and they're not hunting for it.
Yeah, doing that at the airport, and it's great.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty robust set of questions. I appreciate everyone's feedback, but at this point, if someone's willing to make a motion, the motion is in your packet, and it's for, 23 REZ 12, Waverly Place rezoning. We would entertain one.
I'll make a motion.
All right?
I move that the board find 23 REZ 12 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report presentation and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
And a second.
I would second that.
Okay, Ruben? Chris, any specific comments?
I think it's an excellent plan. I've lived here for 40 years, and I've been in this, right, very close to this area for the last 25. If you were to ask me the area that is underperforming or needs a reboot, I would circle the exact area that they have selected, because that area is underutilized. It's mostly just a back area, hidden, extra parking for the downstairs. It might fill up during the amphitheater events, but any other time you drive through there, it's empty, or it's just employees. I was there when the initial Waverly Place Theater was constructed, and they had the Chi-Chi's Mexican restaurant upstairs, and that was the pinnacle at the time.
Yeehaw.
But after the initial movie theater was gone, it definitely had struggled a lot. Had a gym there for a while. Now it's went back to a movie theater, but Cine Bistro has struggled.
Blockbuster was a good one.
Blockbuster.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it checks all the boxes. I understand all the concerns that have been raised, and I agree with the AMI and some of the other storm drainage. But the storm drainage, like they said, it could have been worse than with this plan. So yeah, I think it's a good plan.
I appreciate that. Ruben, any additional comments?
Kind of like Chris, I haven't been here 40 years. I've been here 2 years. And I do think it's, like I said before, it's going to take this area from very good to great. I have patronized Cine Bistro probably 3 times in those 2 years. There hasn't been a lot of investment in the facility itself, and that's, in my opinion, that's the major problem. I think a place like that could actually do very well in this development, but it would have to be more attractive. So,
Does anyone else have any additional comments or feedback? Just as the chair, I want to say, this is also in my neighborhood. I live very close to it. All of the concerns that the neighbors have raised, I feel, are valid. The one that I'd like to be on record in indicating is that the traffic from Tryon Road, if you believe the studies, and these are the professionals, I'm just a volunteer, is only 1% of the aggregate traffic on these roads, Tryon and Kildare. They've been busy for a long time. They will continue to get busy as we develop Chatham Park. And we add all these residences that are going to be over there, and those people are migrating here on east-west thoroughfare. So the majority of that traffic is not going to be the result of this density, in my opinion. It doesn't make it any better if you're a frustrated resident and you're trying to, get from A to B, but I don't think that this development and this plan is the primary culprit. But I think that anyone, regardless of how town council decides to move forward and regardless of what we say, the process has been a good one. I appreciate the fact that there are so many people in our town that care about it, that they want, to be involved in the process. I feel like we've tried to, at every effort, be cognizant of their thoughts. And so that's what I hope is, whatever this result is, I hope that's how people feel. So if there's no other comments, then I guess we could call for a vote. The motion is that to find consistent with the plan, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries with 6-1. Thank you, or 7-1. I mean, amendment to do math. All right, back to me. Our second case on the agenda is 24 REZ 12402 Charles Court rezoning. Rachel Smith, Principal Planner, will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff and the applicant. Ms. Smith, you may proceed.
Good evening, Board. This is a rezoning request for approximately .34 acres located at 402 Charles Court. The site is located at the southwest corner of Charles Court and Ridgecrest Road and abuts West Chatham Street. A detached dwelling on the property was recently demolished. According to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, there is a proposed street side trail on the site's West Chatham Street frontage. Charles Court and Ridgecrest Road are both local streets. Local streets typically require sidewalks on one side. There is a sidewalk on the north side of Ridgecrest Road. West Chatham is a 3-lane thoroughfare in the vicinity of the site. Go Cary Route 4 has existing service on West Chatham Street. The existing zoning is town center, low-density residential. The proposed zoning is town center, medium-density residential conditional use. The Swift Creek Watershed Protection Overlay District will remain. Due to the size and number of lots proposed, a subdivision exemption per NC General Statutes is anticipated. The reason this is important is that the typical site development standards of the LDO would not be required. This includes right-of-way dedication. However, dimensional standards of the LDO, such as minimum lot size, setbacks, and height, would still apply. In this case, only those development standards offered via zoning conditions would apply if the rezoning is approved and the site develops under this exempt provision. Per the zoning conditions, the rezoning is limited to 2 detached dwellings. The front facades will face Ridgecrest Road. The lot split will produce lots of a similar size and orientation as the lots on the south side of Ridgecrest Road. Each lot will have its own driveway, and only one driveway may be on Ridgecrest Road, as shown on the image. The second driveway will be on Charles Court. The applicant is also offering to dedicate 4 feet of right-of-way and easements on the West Chatham Street frontage to provide the full right-of-way per the Imagine Cary Community Plan. Policies in the Live, Engage, Move, and Shape chapters of the Imagine Cary Community Plan apply. The Live chapter highlights the importance of maintaining neighborhood character when redevelopment occurs in existing neighborhoods. The Ridgecrest Road facade orientation commitment may help to promote a uniform development pattern and block face. In terms of the land use transitions recommended by the Shape chapter, the condition limiting the use to detached dwellings may help to ensure compatibility with the land use pattern of the neighborhood. The commitment to dedicate right-of-way and easement on the West Chatham Street frontage may help to address Engage and Move chapter policies for multimodal street design. The condition regarding the location of driveways may help with driveway spacing considerations. No additional right-of-way is needed along the Ridgecrest Road and Charles Court frontages. A neighborhood meeting was held in October, and 2 citizens participated. Questions and concerns expressed at the meeting include the orientation of the proposed lots and roadway access, right-of-way dedication along West Chatham, and future traffic calming measures on Ridgecrest Road. Staff received 2 emails with questions and 1 phone call with concerns regarding the type and appearance of the new homes. A public hearing was held in February. There was 1 written comment in support of the proposal, with some additional comments regarding the need for pedestrian improvements and safety. Council members had limited comments and no questions. Since the public hearing, the applicant has made minor technical corrections to the zoning conditions. Staff find the small residential infill site is supported by some downtown special planning area, live, engage, shape, and move chapters of the Imagine Cary community plan. The proposal would allow additional residents to live near downtown and utilize existing infrastructure investments, with zoning conditions to help ensure use and building orientation that fits the context of the neighborhood. Additionally, the offer of easement and right-of-way on West Chatham may help facilitate the future construction of a street-side trail and multimodal street design. This concludes my presentation. The applicant's representative, Jamie Swedler, is here to provide comments, and I am available for your questions.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jamie Schwedler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street, here on another very complicated case. I'm covering for my colleague Matthew Carpenter, who's on leave with his firstborn, and I'm here to help the applicant, Chuck Smith, to get through this process. The staff has been great once again and has resulted in a nice set of consistent conditions that really make this congruent with the rest of the neighborhood. The low-density residential to medium-density residential really is just consistent with the development that's already happening and the pattern that's already in that area. And this slide really illustrates it well. The rest of the lots along Ridgecrest are already that medium-density residential, and everything else on Ridgecrest, except for the lot in question, has already kind of gone to this format. And you can see that both in the zoning itself, but also in the aerial as the patterns have developed and the orientations of the driveway. Staff did a great job in explaining why the driveway conditions are what they are, so we can orient one lot onto Ridgecrest and the other onto Charles and keep that consistency. And really the only reason that this zoning is necessary is so that the property can be subdivided and meet those minimum lot size requirements, which we can't do in that lower density. And so yes, it's true that that would become an exempt subdivision, but staff has worked hard to try to create as much certainty as they can. And the applicants agreed to dedicate the right-of-way for that street-side trail on the edge of, on West Chatham. And all of those go into all of the downtown policies that are really important for this area of the West Chatham Gateway sub-area. The policies, I think, from the Cary Community Plan that are most applicable here are encouraging the downtown redevelopment and reinvestment, Policy 5 from the Special Area Policy, and fostering the authentic characters of the neighborhood. We have similar lot sizes to the rest of the lots that have already developed along Ridgecrest. We have conditions that will bring them kind of into consistency in the orientation of the driveways and the layout, so that even though it's integrated into kind of these other lower density residential areas, the look and the feel and the orientation will be the same. The LIVE chapter, of course, supports the variety of housing and maintaining the established neighborhoods. This area of Cary, as you know, in downtown is in that transition of existing established neighborhoods and then these new lots being introduced. And the conditions that you see on the screen really help to make that a seamless transition. It's also supported by the Engage and Move chapters when we talked about the dedication of the right-of-way for that street side trail along Chatham Street. So again, just the corner of that area, but it has the opportunity to contribute to that in a way that none of the other lots do. So those are the physical necessities, and then the other practical necessity is that this applicant is trying to move forward with the rezoning because they were part of a condemnation case that's now been resolved and need to be out of their home by the end of the year. So they're trying to move forward with this subdivision and get those permits through Cary in the near term so that they can move forward. And hopefully that the simplicity of the case and the staff has been great to work with, that we can get that done. So those are the planning necessities and the practical necessities that bring us before you tonight. I'm here and happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Anyone? My only question is, it's two detached dwellings. Are they single family? Are there any restrictions on what each of those two detached dwellings are? Or could they be duplexes, for instance?
Detached only. So locally, you'll call that single family, but in our code, it's detached dwelling. So that is only what can be built.
That's, okay. Perfect. That was my only question.
Just what's the length of the frontage on Chatham that would get the dedicated right-of-way for a side path?
So it's two segments, so it's 30 and 65. So if you look at the little half notch, which generally will align with where the right-of-way will go, it'll be 30 and then 5 feet in for there. Did that answer your question?
I'm only seeing one section that goes into the Chatham right-of-way, so I don't understand the two different dimensions.
Is it that western vertical line is in the Chatham? Is that where the right-of-way is, or is it just that little chopped off corner where the C touches the
It
the
looked like
yellow?
to me it would be the diagonal corner of the parcel.
It's 30 right here.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, the second tangent is right here. And
okay.
I do have, this tangent is 65, and this tangent, which is going to be parallel to the street, is going to be 30.
Gotcha. Connecting the 2 points, yeah. Thank you.
Great. All right, if no other questions, is someone prepared to make a motion with regard to this case?
I move the board find 24 REZ 12 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Any additional comments?
Makes common sense.
A second.
Second, yep, sorry, we needed that before I asked my questions. I appreciate that. And I also recognize we don't have any additional questions. So we'll take a vote. Would all those in favor please state aye? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. And I believe now I'm allowed to call this meeting to thank you for participating, and we call the meeting adjourned. Have a good evening.